Well, welcome back to the Tuxes Tomahawks podcast for like the sixth time this week, because apparently I have to do all these shows now to try to get as many people who are trying to run for the most important position in the state of Colorado's GOP because it's absolute, chaos out there. So, Darcy Schoening, thank you so much for coming on the show. Like I said, I offered it to every single person running against you, and you're one of the people that scheduled an in-person interview because I think it's really important for everyone in the state of Colorado that doesn't get to meet you in person, because our state's so big, to get a good one-on-one discussion because, the 30-second clips, the 1-minute clips, the 9-minute, things on 9 News, it's just not enough to get to know you as a person. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Adam, and thanks for all you're doing for the state of Colorado. I appreciate your time.
Trying to without getting assassinated. It's becoming a harder task as I go by day by day. So Darcy, for people who don't know who are you? When did you get involved in politics, and why are you running for state chair for the Colorado GOP?
So, my name's Darcy Schoening. I'm currently the Director of Special Initiatives for the Colorado GOP. I write policies for local school boards, city councils, and county commissions to protect them from the overreach of police and the state government. And I previously served as chair of Moms for Liberty. I was a Monument City Councilwoman. I've been involved in Colorado politics basically since I moved to Colorado. But this is an interesting question, and I'm glad you asked it. So, I've been involved with politics in general probably since the day I came out of my mother. My parents would tell you that Darcy is always involving herself in issues that she shouldn't, according to them. But the way that I see it is that I'm always involving myself in areas where I see a lack of justice or a lack of truth. And so very early on, even in high school, I was, fighting over the uniform policies, referencing state laws and holding teachers accountable for trampling on students' rights. And so that's who I am. I go where I'm needed and I fight the fight that needs to be fought. And so I declared for Colorado GOP chair about 2 months ago because I know that I am the best candidate to lead this state in the new Trump era.
No, for sure. I mean, you have definitely been highly active. I think when I decided it was a good idea to get involved in state politics, which I semi-regret now, I've been involved on the federal side for 15 years, trying to get people to do their jobs in the Pentagon. And, someone made the suggestion to me from Texas that I should, you should contribute to your local county. And next thing I know, I'm going to 6:30 a.m. pancake breakfast that nobody goes to. And then I'm realizing that there's a bunch of people passing laws and raising my taxes. And I'm like, wait a minute, I got to do something. So I like Google Colorado GOP, and your name comes up. Next thing I know, I'm at a luncheon. I'm like, okay, I have no idea what's going on. And then I'm getting yelled at by some Democratic operative, like newspaper, saying I'm a lobbyist. I'm like, right. Okay. So this is how this is going to work. Perfect.
Yep.
Awesome. So this is how state politics work. So when did you first get involved with the Colorado GOP, and what is your role there now? Because you do work with the current chairman and everyone else. So how did you get involved with the Colorado GOP to start off with?
Yeah, so that's also a really good question. Because I'm so involved in general, and I was with Moms for Liberty from about 2021 to 2023, late 2023, with Christy Davis, who's now chair. And the Moms for Liberty chapter that I founded basically took off like wildfire. It was known as, and it's still known as, one of the most prominent Moms for Liberty chapters in the country. We were featured on CNN. I did an hour and a half CNN interview on parental rights and the trans agenda. It was really important to me to do that interview. And Christy Davis and I started to notice, mid 2023, hey, we could get a lot of work done with these school boards by simply looking at the laws coming down from the state legislature ahead of time and saying, okay, D20, D11, what have you, this is the law coming down. We'll use the pronoun bill as an example. And here's what it looks like. And when it passes, here's what we need you to do policy wise. Here's the policy we need you to pass to protect your students. So we said, for example, you need parental consent to use different pronouns for a child. So all of that to say, I quickly realized, look, like I could go outside of El Paso County and really make a dent in this state by getting localities and school boards to come on board with the conservative agenda and basically, give the middle finger to the state. And so in order to do that, I started having conversations with Dave Williams, the current chair. And he's like, it really does fit into your brand. And you do so much work for the party just by way of volunteer work. I go in the office and answer phones. I do whatever's needed. He said, this fits into your brand. You should be the director of special initiatives, run some ballot initiatives to protect children, keep writing those policies. And here I am. So it was a role that was largely forged. It was created for me because of the work that I do in this state. So I was really excited to hold that position as the first person, and I hope that somebody else takes that position when I'm chair.
No, that's really good. And there's obviously been like so much controversy with the current leadership, from the email that got sent out, and then you start seeing all these division within the groups, and there's been so much chaos between all these meetings. We'll talk about that probably later because I have a lot of questions about what happened like the last night and the last week because I'm about ready to put my head through a piece of drywall, but I'm running out of stucco or plaster down in my garage at this point. So what are your what's your motivation to be the best leader? Like, what makes you think that you can be the best candidate that's going to change from the current leadership now?
Okay, so I'll give you an example. So the Steve Bannon dinner, the centennial dinner that's going to occur on Friday, it was already canceled once by the Denver Marriott. Then it was canceled by the Antlers down here in Colorado Springs. It wasn't going to happen until I got on the phone with one of my really good donors and said, look, we need help. He canceled an event at his venue on Friday to get the Colorado GOP up and moving and get that Bannon event going. And then it almost got canceled again today because there are some issues with security. So I've been communicating with Colorado Springs Police Department, been communicating with the venue, the donors. That's who I am. The Colorado GOP has to operate in that way, right? What are your skills? What are you good at? And how can we use those skills to help get candidates elected? And that is one of my biggest strengths is like I said earlier, I go where I'm needed. I do what needs to be done. I keep my head down. I do the work. I've been showing people for years that I'm a leader, but more than that, I'm able to take other people and identify their best skills so that we're all working towards a common goal and we're not fighting. We're getting candidates elected. And so for those reasons, I'm the only candidate in my mind to lead the GOP in this next era.
No, those are good points. And like a question I've asked everybody is, what are the top three things that you want to do as chair, the changes you want to see, and how are you going to make those, initiatives work within your leadership if you're elected?
So we need a more coordinated approach to fundraising. I'm sure you've heard me talk about Bob, Build Our Benches, the donor initiative that my team and I have built over the last 2 months. I have really good donor relationships. And in order to maintain those, we have to use the donors' dollars for only two things: to get candidates elected and to keep the lights on. And if we continue to do those two things, then the donors will have confidence in us. So when we flip those school board seats in 2025 and we hold on to the critical seats that we need to hold on to, we're going to be rolling into 2026 with momentum, with donor confidence, volunteer confidence. So I really want to build out that fundraising network, but I also want to build out the data and infrastructure. As you know, precinct leaders don't have all the data they need at their fingertips to get candidates elected. Candidates are always looking for lists, looking for processes, looking for strategy. So on day one of my administration, I'm going to be in that office, turning the lights on and putting together the spreadsheets, putting together the processes, and making this a well-oiled machine that it truly never has been. And then lastly, aside from getting candidates elected, fundraising, building out that infrastructure, I'm going to be honest, most GOPs in the past and many that are members of this GOP now, they'll say, well, local policy is not our problem, right? We don't need to mess with local politics. Oh gosh, in a blue state, local is so important. It's more important than anything else, as you know, Adam, because if you can't get your legislation passed or you can't stop a bill, it doesn't end there. You can go home and go to your city council and help them write policies that protect your family. You can get better candidates elected. You can run for city council. So that focus on local, building our benches and protecting our families by way of local policy is something that I really want to focus heavily on for the GOP.
No, for sure. And you bring up something really interesting is about, electing good candidates and getting good candidates in there. And I think the question I heard a lot, especially after the Colorado Hispanic reforms we had, was, you know, should the state, GOP leadership, should they stay neutral in the primaries? Because in the primaries, I mean, what I've seen, you got a lot of good candidates, you got a lot of bad candidates, and we can't fund all of them. We can, we have to be selective in who we can actually endorse, or I shouldn't say endorse yet, but like who we can actually provide money to. What is your opinion on, should we endorse candidates into the primary? Should we not? Should we remain neutral? What is your stance on that?
Well, as you know, I led, pushed for, and successfully received the historic endorsement of President Trump by the Colorado GOP in 2023 before the primaries were over. And that was really important to me and to our party because the Colorado Supreme Court was trying to bar him from the ballot at the time. There were 2 assassination attempts on President Trump's life. So it was really important that as a party, we stand for President Trump, who stood for us all this time. Now, the problem was endorsing down ballot. So endorsing any office other than the president had unintended consequences that were not in our favor. So I do believe the Colorado GOP went about the primary endorsements with really good intentions. As my dad says, the road to hell is often paved with good intentions. So those good intentions didn't exactly translate because we had, as you saw, more candidates upset, more division. All of the groups were upset. The activists were upset. And what did it accomplish? What was the payout versus what was the negativity that erupted from this? And if we look back, we know that the payoff, it just wasn't that great, right? People aren't going to the Colorado GOP website to say, I wonder who I should vote for in my House district. It just doesn't work that way. So we as a party moving forward, what I want to do is ask the candidates 2-page questionnaires, very straightforward, conservative oriented questions. Let them answer those questions and put that information on the website available to voters. Just like on the website, we'll put who went through assembly, who got signatures, how much they paid for those signatures, because it's not our job to be kingmakers. It's not our job to put the thumbs on the scale. Our job is to put the information out there and trust that our voters are intelligent and conservative enough to make the best choices. And when we arm them with that info, they will.
That's that's a good point that you say our voters should be intelligent enough because, for example, I was working with some of the races up here in Weld County, and they were asking about the state questionnaire, and these are just basic things like, are you pro-life? Are you pro-gun? Like, you're not asking algebra or calculus questions, but like one thing that concerned me was that there was a candidate who was running in a pretty high office up here, and they refused to answer the question on abortion because they're like, well, if I answer that question, then I'm going to lose a bunch of voters. And like that's kind of concerning for me because it's like if you have somebody running in a Republican seat who refuses to answer basic questions about the Republican Party, but then wants to get elected into a Republican position and then they win, which they did, it's just like, well, who's going to be involved in the party moving forward, and is that going to cause more division with the state leadership or anything else moving forward? So it sounds like you think at least a basic questionnaire is good to kind of like not vetting is a bad word, but like, hey, can you abide by the RNC charter like as a registered Republican? Like, is that really a big deal?
Right. And by and large, we don't even have to ask that question. If they're avoiding questions like, are you pro-life or do you support the Second Amendment? I mean, that kind of gives you your answer right there. So, the GOP website right now is really, really bad. That's something that I've talked about over and over. We've got to build that out and have the county websites feed into that state website. And then when we do that and we put the information about the candidates out there, I think that's sufficient. I mean, every organization across the country has some questions that they ask candidates and they put the information out there. So, like I said, if we do that, our voters will make the right choice and they don't need us to say what the right choice is and cause division amongst the people we work for.
Yeah, because you bring in a good point about donors. Like the biggest thing that stops donors is doubt. I had that conversation with somebody else about that, and we've had so much doubt in the party in the past year. I would say, we had the attempted ousting of the party in the middle of a presidential election. You had all these things going on, and a lot of people pulled their money away. So with all those controversies that went on that you had to personally deal with as part of the leadership, what do you think is the best way forward of dealing with those detractors in the party that don't necessarily want to contribute to the party, but they want to do things that are more or less oriented towards themselves for their own personal benefit?
Well, I mean, okay, so building the donor confidence is kind of a separate issue, right? Because donors are just like me or you. They're just
Hmm.
people, right? And when we spend money, whether it's $1 or $1,000, we want to know that those dollars went to something, that they weren't just flushed down the toilet, basically, on lawsuits or what have you.
Yeah, we
So
wasted a lot of money doing that.
yeah, yeah. So we have got to get everybody working in the same direction, as I said earlier, and stop the inter party BS in order to increase donor confidence. But as you said, I mean, we can't have candidates that are out there working for themselves and not carrying the message of the Republican Party, because that also erodes donor confidence. So, but once we build out the infrastructure, Adam, and we get the donors working on our side, and we flip seats and we keep this thing moving, these questions are going to answer themselves. It's that right now we're stuck. Right now we have no momentum. We have no, major donor base, and we have no candidate bench. But once we build those things, we'll be in a much better spot.
That's a good point. And so, I mean, like between the Steve Bannon event, them trying to cancel it, Antifa's all over the place, all these things are going on. And then you have, we still have the lawsuit that's filed, against some of the other members, all this stuff going on. If you get elected chair, like, what are you going to do with those issues? Like with the lawsuit or with the detractors within the party? Like, what is your role going to be and how are you going to handle those situations?
Well, I believe the role of chair is to be a neutral third party that holds fair meetings to carry the will of the body, right? So, and that's important because whether you like the chair or you don't like the chair, you have to remember that in 2 years, you're going to have somebody different, right?
Yeah.
And you
Hmm.
don't want that person imposing their will and their personality conflicts onto the body. So it's about asking the body, hey, we're going to continue on with this lawsuit. Is that okay with you? Or do you want to see another resolution here? Now, I've often said, and I'll say it again, running this Colorado GOP needs to be treated like we're running an organization. When I managed Marriott properties and two people were fighting, two front desk people, I couldn't just walk away and say, okay, Seth and Angela hate each other today, so we're just not going to get any work done, and guests aren't going to get checked in, and everybody can just do whatever they want, right? So why do we run this crucial party that way? We can't. It's a recipe for failure. No, you've got to take Seth and Angela into a room or onto a Zoom call, and you've got to say, look, this has to stop. Let's talk it out. Let's see how we can move on together as a team. Does that sound annoying? Does that sound cringe? Yeah, it does. And I've had to do it as a manager many, many times. It's horrible. But when you do that work, when you do that work as a leader, getting in there and triaging those personality issues, they don't grow and they don't fester and they don't take our party down. So we as leaders have to just stand up and do the uncomfortable things we don't want to do sometimes.
No, for sure. And you mentioned local control before versus state control and how that's been integrated. We've had several reorganization meetings in the past couple weeks that have just absolutely failed. There's been controversies filed. There's been all these things going on. You know, there's been, even in Weld County, you were at that meeting where, they voted to not allow PCPs to vote in that election, which in my opinion, I don't think was really fair for all the Republicans in Weld County. That's just my personal opinion. Doesn't mean anything. I'm not a voting member. But how are you going to deal with those issues of local control versus working together collectively with the counties in the future? Because if you have all these people within the party that are trying to do certain things to benefit themselves, whether it's to maintain election integrity or whatever else it is, or voting, or these Zoom calls where like votes can't be counted or it's complete chaos in the middle of that. Like, what do you think is the best solution for, the state helping with local control, keeping the counties independent, but also making sure that we have the most amount of PCPs, district captains participating in the process, and they're not kept out of the party?
Yeah. So one word, empowerment. Again, no different than when you manage an organization. These PCPs, these counties, they have local autonomy and they have the ability to pass their own bylaws and they have the ability to help their candidates, right? The state GOP is not to interfere in bylaws or interfere in the inner workings of the county parties unless something is happening so that is so egregious that it can't be handled at the county level. So when I say empowering these people, when somebody becomes a new chair in a county, we have to ask them, what are your pain points? What are you going through out in your county? What personality conflicts do you have? And then take it a step further. I've heard from so many counties on the Western Slope, they don't ever see leadership. They don't have a good relationship with the state because they're 5-6 hours away. So
Right.
I have pledged that, I'll be out on the Western Slope at least twice a month, out on the Eastern Plains at least twice a month, not during a snowstorm. I know that much, but I'll be out there because, we want to communicate with our leaders and we want to communicate with what they need and what they're seeing. And then back to the triaging, Adam, when you have a county where something is starting to fester, let's get out there today. Let's get on the phone or make that drive, talk to that chair, vice chair, secretary, figure this out before it gets to the level of what you just saw in Weld County. Because as you and I both know, that could have been handled before it got to that level.
Yeah, and I think the biggest issue was like they didn't appoint PCPs 60 days prior, and it turned to this whole, whatever. Then they weren't allowed to vote. Then they let them in after the fact, but then they weren't allowed to vote for the new people. So it just kind of kept a lot of weird things going. But you mentioned like the local control stuff, but for example, like in the CD3 meeting, we had Barb Kirkmeyer going down to Pueblo County, and she doesn't even represent that district, but she's theoretically influencing votes. The national committee chairwoman was running things off her personal laptop, and they lost a bunch of votes, and now people don't know what's the result of that, and they're probably gonna have to redo that meeting too because people didn't know how to use the technology. The votes weren't accurate. You had one person in charge of tallying the votes, and they were taking personal texts on their cell phone for the largest district in the state of Colorado. Like, I think you kind of mentioned this with the website. Like the website's an absolute disaster. We don't have modern technology. We don't have a
No.
modern social media presence, and then we have other representatives. Like I know Lauren personally. I've worked with her in the past, and she's showing up to different meetings in different counties that she doesn't represent. Like I don't I don't know what my personal stance is on this, but like what's your personal stance on other elected officials going to other counties and like getting involved in this so-called local control? Because it doesn't seem like it's local control at that point. It seems like the county's being influenced by outside forces, and I don't know if that's really in the best interest of that county for deciding who its leadership should be.
Well, I mean, that's a good question. We can't, for example, as you know, I can't tell an elected official, hey, mind your own business. That's not going to go over well.
Mhm.
But you bring up a valid point. Like, why does a representative up in Weld County have any business to conduct down in Pueblo?
Mm.
Um, yeah, I mean, playing devil's advocate, look, I mean, there have been times where I've had to go to other counties and say, look, what's going on here? Let's talk about this. So I would like to think that they're operating in the same manner, but you and I kind of
I
know
would beg to differ on that in my personal opinion.
that's not exactly what's going on here. So
No.
we've got to talk to those elected officials and say, okay, hey, what are you actually doing? I mean, this goes back to everything that I continue to say: getting on the phone, showing up, saying, hey, Barb, let's go have a cup of coffee and talk about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And most of the time when I do that, people people are like, oh, you bring up a valid point. Maybe I should be questioning my actions. That's the first step, though, to talk with these people. Why are you doing what you're doing? And are you going to get a satisfactory answer? And then, okay, why are we not all working in the same direction? Why are you not helping find school board candidates? Why are you putting all your time into inter-party drama. That's what we have to stop. And as chair, as leader, I mean, I'm going to be hammering this home to people. If you're down in Pueblo on a Thursday night, and that's not even your county, and you're trying to steer the narrative there, guess what? I got a list of 200 people that you can call tonight and help a candidate, because this type of nonsense is not going to fly under my leadership.
Well, good, because when she shows up to meetings with a pre-printed out list of people she doesn't know saying this is who you're going to vote for, that's not even giving anyone a fair chance in the so-called local control narrative to change over leadership, to have new PCPs, to have new district captains. It seems
Yeah.
like they have a preset narrative and they're trying to control the so-called local control. I don't necessarily think that's in the best interest of the party moving forward if we're trying to bring in more Republicans into the party. More, we're trying to get independents to register Republicans. I don't think that's the best way forward to do that. And it sounds like you have a pretty good plan moving forward with that. And speaking of candidates and who we're going to put on this Build Your Benches initiative, like we talked about at the Colorado Hispanic Republicans Forum about the opt out and the primaries. So what is your position on opening keeping the primaries closed or opening up the primaries? Like, what do you think is the best solution to get the best Republican candidates into the Republican Party here in Colorado?
Yeah, so the primaries right now are open. Kent Theory Prop 108, thanks to that. It was the single most disastrous occurrence for Colorado Republicans. The weak Republicans at the time who were responsible for ushering that in should thank themselves for our utter failure now. And we have to reverse the open primary. I'm going to continue the lawsuit against Prop 108, but as I've mentioned, I've also been meeting with Democrat legislators. We don't have a lot in common, right? But the one thing we do have in common is that neither party wants their elections bought and paid for, and neither party wants these milquetoast candidates that come from the open primaries. And so, in my mind, we may be able to make some headway with legislation. Now, after the primaries are closed, we can go on to the opt out, which is also really important for Colorado Republicans. When you can signature on to become a candidate, and those signatures in Colorado are now running $3 to $20. There's a big range. I know a candidate who sold his motorcycle to get on the ballot. Okay. That is not how politics is supposed to work. This pay to play is gross, and it gives us the candidates that wind up in the middle. It's candidates that are beholden to the donor base and not to their voters. So we will continue on to the opt out as well. It's important that both of those two things are accomplished.
So you think instead of shifting donor support to individuals trying to buy themselves onto the ballot, it's more important to shift donor confidence to the party so that the party can distribute those funds to those candidates moving forward?
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of donor education that needs to happen. I'm a grassroots type of person. They call me far right everywhere in the media, as you know. But the
Yes.
donors who historically mostly work with the more moderate Republicans, they trust me, and so I talk to them a lot, and I'll say, hey, and this is a fake name. I'll say, hey, Jed, why did you give $10,000 to this candidate who is not the most conservative candidate? And the answer every single time is so and so told me to. I just write the checks. So and so told me to. And there's a couple so and so's. And then there's a couple so and so's who are in charge of those so and so's. And, I can get to that on another call. But when I've said, okay, Jed, let me tell you, he's not that conservative. Here's why. And I want you to support this person. They're like, oh, thanks for telling me. I didn't know. Just like anything else, like you don't know what you don't know. So we've got to get these donors to the side of the conservative Republicans as well. And that's going to be a huge task of my administration, is rebuilding their confidence, but also rebuilding it within the conservative framework.
Yeah, and this is a good point to make sure that you differentiate yourself from the other candidates, because you have Kevin McCartney, Richard Holtorf, Britta Horn. They've all came out saying they want to keep the open primaries. right? And same thing in CD3, the national committee chairwoman down there, she was opting for, open primaries and trying to push the candidates that way. And then even last night, which I thought was absolutely insane, in CD4, even Congresswoman Lauren Boebert came out and said she wants to opt into the open primaries. And I'm like, wait, what is going on right now? Because you have three candidates, I would say Lori Sane, yourself, and Jerry McGoodall, who want to close the primaries, and then everyone else running for position right now is for the open primary. So you're going to have a lot of people to deal with that are going to fight you on these issues, including apparently a congresswoman now, which I did not know that was her position until last night. So how are you going to keep those people involved in the party, and how are you going to make them fall under your leadership if you want to close the primary moving forward?
Well, I mean, closing the primary is done by a vote of the body, right? So these people, they don't have to say, okay, well, this is what Darcy wants, so I have to fall in line. No, you're part of the Republican Party. This is what the Republican Party has voted for. It's what we in Colorado want.
Mhm.
And I think it's just like anything else. It's education. And once we close those primaries, Adam, Colorado Republicans are going to be thrilled with the quality of the candidates and just how much more conservative these candidates are. We're not going to have any more Joe O'Days. We're going to have candidates that represent the values of the Republican Party. And that's something that nobody can argue with. And you know what? If they want to argue with that and say, well, I don't want these conservatives. I want candidates who don't represent the party as much. Well, that's a whole nother animal. And I'm not sure that being involved in the Republican Party is necessarily like what you want to do in life right now. And I have no problem saying that.
I would actually agree with you. Yeah, it's a pretty admirable stance to do that because, like I said, even fighting a person in Congress, that's difficult to do. I do it on a daily basis here. That's why they all hate me here. But but the problem is like you have so much of these divisions. They all call for unity. They all call for this. But I sat there and I said, what are you going to do about it? You can use buzzwords all you want, but what are you going to actually get action about it? But I mean, to be fair, you have, at least what I've seen on the internet, you have the most endorsements out of anyone running for chair right now. Like, do you want to speak about some of the endorsements you've gotten and like all the universal support you've gotten? Do you have any other endorsements that are coming forward that you're looking forward to?
There's a couple big ones that are coming out this week that I can't speak to just yet. They're going to be beyond game changers. But I'm endorsed by Joel Oldman. Joe rarely endorses, so his
Mhm.
endorsement should speak volumes. He said very clearly on air, I'm endorsing Darcy because I trust her, because she does the fight, she walks the walk, and she doesn't just talk. And that is what most people who have endorsed me would tell you. I've got endorsements from various young Republicans, candidates, county commissioners, mayors. The mayor of Palmer Lake endorsed me. The former mayor of Parker, Jeff Toborg, district captains. I sent out a mailer today with all my endorsements, so you guys will be getting that. You can also find them on my website. I think that speaks to my ability to work with anybody and my ability to just really humanize people. I don't want to push anybody out of this party. I want to figure out how we can keep them and how we can utilize their skills. And the Congress people have told me that they're comfortable working with me because of the fact that I'm honest, where you stand. When various people from the state party were not willing to help Gabe Evans this last cycle, Gabe will tell you I was there. I cured ballots for Gabe. So my
Mhm.
endorsements speak to the fact that I'm a team player and people want to work with me.
No, that's really good. So, like, speaking of all the representatives you just talked about, what are you going to do about candidates like, for example, I posted this really good podcast episode today with this guy I interviewed named Casey West. He's a Marine who has stage 4 terminal brain cancer, and he can't get a single representative, local or on the national side, to advocate for him getting an appointment at the VA. And his representative is Brittany Peterson or whatever her name is, in out in Lakewood out there. So she's useless. But I think she got over 1,000 phone calls today. You're welcome, ma'am. I'm gonna continue annoying the shit out of you. But like everyone wants around pro veteran, blah 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 blah. So what are you going to do about candidates who they run on these platforms, but then they don't do as they say? Like, do you think we should work on removing them in the future? Do you think we should have that talk with them? Like, we need good candidates that run say and do what they say they're going to do. And I think what I've seen is that there's several representatives now who aren't doing those things. We got some huge fights going on in the Capitol right now with gun rights and everything else. So how do you think, with even all the divisive sides in the Republican Party now, what can we do to make sure that we are holding our candidates responsible and accountable to the RNC charter and what you want to do as the future chair if you are elected?
Yeah, so I mean, just like the primary neutrality, it's just about educating the voters and putting the information out there. Liberty Scorecard, Colorado Union of Taxpayers, both of those links should be on our website at all times. The legislator scores should be readily available for people, and we need to educate the voters about how these scorecards work. Why does your representative have a D, and what does that mean?
Yeah, I
And
don't
then
understand that. I don't know how you have a D on your report card and still be a Republican. That makes zero sense to me.
I know, I know. And then conversations need to happen. So we have to always have that human element. If we don't, we're gonna wreck ourselves. So we've got to we have to put the due diligence in to where we say, okay, Rep Bridges, your votes this year so far, like, they kind of suck. So why is that? What are you doing? Are you beholden to some donors right now? Are you scared of the Democrats?
Do we need to
What's
primary
happening?
you?
Yeah. And how can we help you? So Rep Stephanie Luck always talks about this. She has told me multiple stories of when she has pulled another legislator aside and said, hey, I'm not sure that your vote is as liberty minded as you thought it was. Can we talk about it? And Adam, I mean, just because somebody becomes a state representative doesn't mean they're perfect. It doesn't mean that they know it all. And it doesn't even mean that they sadly necessarily have a good understanding of what liberty is. So we do owe it to our voters and owe it to those elected officials to put that information out there, but also to work with them and figure out how we can get them from where they are to where the voters want them to be.
No, that's good. So you are probably the most controversial candidate running right now. You have your mugshot all over the internet. You got cigars and guns blazing everywhere. You're fighting the trans people down in Colorado Springs. Um, and even at the Colorado Hispanic Republicans forum, when I'm sitting there and all of a sudden Lori Sane starts yelling at you about like money in the party or something, like what goes, I mean, just so you can clear the record for everyone who doesn't know who you are and just sees all the memes from, I don't know, Better Betsy Freedom or something on the internet. Like, how do you address those issues? What went on with the controversy at the Colorado Hispanic Republicans? Like, what is your position on all those things and moving forward as the best candidate for chair?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that question. I mean, I am controversial, but as you know, I'm controversial because I say the things that other people don't want to say, right? Like, I have no problem saying being transgender, that's a mental illness. I'm not going to call it anything else for your feelings. And
It
sometimes people
is.
have a problem with the fact that I don't take their feelings into account, but that's not what this is, right? Our values aren't based upon feelings. They're based upon truth and liberty and limited government. So I'm controversial because I say the things that other people don't want to say. Kyle Clark had me on his show, and he asked me questions that he thought were going to make me back down. Like, he said, are you really calling for Tina Peters, or are you really calling for President Trump to withhold funding to Colorado because of Tina Peters? And I said, yes, I am. And then he said, why do you use mean names sometimes to talk about people? And I said, because then I get your attention and you report my story. And then there's more attention around my story. And then I can affect change. And he's like, wait, what? So you're just admitting that you're kind of using me, a media agent, on live air. And
Good.
yes, I mean, you know where you stand with me. And that makes some people uncomfortable. That's why I'm controversial. When Lori Sane stepped into the race, should I have made those comments that I made to CTR? Potentially not. They obviously hurt her feelings. I told her I'm sorry that my comments hurt her feelings. I said she's not a leader and she's not a doer. And that really upset her. So she tore into me at the Colorado Hispanic Republicans Forum. One of the things that Lori tore into me for is owing the state party money. So there's a statement on my website as we speak. There's an email that's going out. Are you familiar with why I owe the state party money, Adam?
Not really. I heard it had something to do with DC, but I was so
Mhm.
busy hanging out with Byron Donalds and Wesley Hunt. Like I stopped by your event for like 5 minutes and left. So
Yeah. Yeah. So $1,200 was approved by the state party.
mhm,
And because the cocktail party went from about 40 people to 300 people, it went from $1,200 to $6,000.
mhm.
So the state party is not willing to cover those charges. So I'm covering them. So I'm covering the charges for people having tacos and drinks in Washington, D.C. That's what this is. And so Miss Sane was given that information by the state party or by whoever from the XCOM meeting so that she could blatantly use that as a political attack. I don't think that that political attack has any merit. I think that the state party should have covered anything that the hotel messed up on and routed those charges to the state party's card. I don't think a single mother who threw that party together at the last minute so that we all had something to do should be responsible for that. But here we are.
That's interesting though, because like I had to pay for drink tickets and it was like $100 for 3 tickets, and then apparently they like what charged you for that, even though I paid it. Like that doesn't make any sense.
I don't know who all they charged and who they didn't. I know that I didn't ever walk up to the bar, for example, and buy myself any drinks. Like I was socializing. I was very busy. But when the final bill was handed down, there are a ton of drinks on there and a ton of food. And my guess would just be that this hotel, which they went above and beyond to accommodate us last minute, right? They really did.
Yeah.
I think that the billing just got confusing. Like it is what it is. I don't even necessarily have any ill will towards the hotel, but where we are now is I'm going to pay that. I've
So you
already
have to
paid.
pay the $4,800 yourself back to it now?
Yeah.
That really sucks.
Yeah. So that's what they say when they say that Darcy owes the state party money. That's the money. So I hope everyone had fun in Washington D.C. Um,
I did.
so
It was great.
that's what that is. And as far as my mug shot being everywhere, I don't have any recent mug shots. I might by Saturday if we continue at this pace. No, I'm just kidding.
I was gonna say, who do you want
But
to get in a fight with next, Darcy? We can line them up for you outside.
I know, but
Antifa's gonna be there.
yeah,
We,
right.
we can just let them know.
I mean, don't tempt me, Adam. I'm gonna be blowing them kisses most likely. I'm known for blowing Antifa kisses. Um, I'm not, I'm not perfect, right? Like, yes, I got DUIs when I was younger. Yes, I was once arrested for felony theft. It sounds so salacious. The statement is now on my website. I was 8 months pregnant when I was arrested. I was at a gas station, called the police, dialed 911 because I had just been robbed. The police took my driver's license. They went to their car and they came back and they said, Miss Schoening, you have a warrant and you're going to jail. And I was in another state. I was in Indiana. And they said, Hamilton County has a warrant out for you. Come to find out, it was a business deal. I owned a construction company and a woman's roof was not completed. And I mean, the police, in my opinion, did no due diligence. I never received a call and it just went to a warrant. So the second I was booked in to that Indiana jail, I was stuck there for 27 days as a pregnant lady until Tennessee extradited me. When I got to Tennessee, paid that. It was immediately rectified, dismissed, totally over with. But they love that mugshot of me with that awful tank top and no makeup on, 8-month pregnant Darcy in the car doesn't know that that picture is going to be all over the internet in a matter of, I don't know, what is it, 10, 11, 12 years later. So that's all that is. Adam, you know me, you've met my children.
You have
I
great
am
kids.
thank you. I'm a leader in the community. I've raised two beautiful children. I've proven time and time again that, the mistakes that you make as a younger person, they don't define you. If anything, they make us stronger. They make us who we are. My
Yeah, that's fair.
experience in that Indiana jail lent me an understanding of the criminal justice system that most of my Republican peers just don't have. Did I want that experience? No, but we don't always get to choose. And I'm proud that, I went through trials and tribulations in life, but here I am standing tall for our values, for our community, for our children. And anybody that tries to knock me down about what I did 10, 20 years ago, it just shows. First of all, it shows that's all they got, right? Because they can't say Darcy's not fighting. They can't say I'm not doing the work. They can't say I don't understand the policies. So they just flash old mugshots. And that's all they've got. And it shows, I believe, the lowness of their character. Because who are we as Republicans, as human beings, if we say this person has a mugshot or this person was arrested, so they can never be in our party again? They definitely can't be a leader. Like, what? Are you supposed to
No,
just
for sure. I
lock
mean,
me in a jail cell and throw away the key?
well, and your involvement, like you said, with the criminal justice system probably gave you a lot of insight, and that's why you've been involved with Tina Peters, right? Like you've worked on that directly and stuff, and helped her with that case.
Definitely. She's really important to me. We've been friends for years. And sadly, I know the feeling of that orange jumpsuit on your skin day in and day out. I know what it feels like to not be able to eat the food in there. I know what it feels like to be in a environment with a bunch of crazy people that want to hurt you 24/7.
Right.
So Tina's situation is so urgent to me. When you're in jail, you're not a human anymore. I mean, you're not. I don't want to sound like a Democrat, but you're in a cage. You're an animal. And Tina Peters, who stood for us, is being treated right now like an animal. And it's the
Yeah.
most dehumanizing feeling you could ever experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's like one of the most contentious issues going on right now. Even I think all sides would agree in the Republican Party right now that she needs to be released and that needs to be mitigated. And hopefully Trump's DOJ is going to be able to step in and override some of the state things that are going on because, we don't want this to turn into a space station situation where it's a political football. We leave people stranded somewhere for 9 months in space, which is basically what's happened to Tina Peters right now. They're stranding her there for political reasons, and there's no reason to do that. She's not a threat. I mean, we have fentanyl dealers and rapists and drug dealers that are getting way less punishments than that. And the fact that we're
Right.
doing that to somebody who just tried to expose election corruption is ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Chaffee County's largest fentanyl dealer was sentenced in January to 8 years. And Tina
That's
got none.
insane. Yeah, that's insane. So, all right, so you have you build your benches initiative. You want to bring back donors. Um, you want to reform the communications and technology stuff. You have to pay the GOP $4,800. Apparently, you're going to free Tina Peters. You've been to jail. You like to fight trans people. I think that's Darcy in a nutshell. So May 29th is a big deal coming up. We have the Steve Bannon event coming up this week, and we have the election on the 29th right now. Why should members of the SEC and all the voting body in the state of Colorado, why should they vote for you for chair? What makes you the best candidate?
Well, if they vote for me, they know what they're getting. They've already seen the work. They've seen me on TV with Kyle Clark recently. They've seen me standing for the kids in Durango. They've seen me standing for the counties and cities across the state. They've seen me day after day after day answering their calls, helping them solve their issues. They know that I'm always going to be there for them. I don't ever leave them hanging. So a vote for me for chair is a sure thing. It's a vote to say, I've seen the work she does. I trust her and I'm ready to help elevate this party to the next level with her leadership. A vote for anybody else at this juncture is an unsure vote because nobody else in this race has demonstrated to the voters that day in and day out, they keep their head down and they do the work that this party requires right now.
I think that's great. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on here and being vulnerable and being willing to tell your story and talk about the issues in a long form. Because like I said, people don't get to really know who Darcy Schoening is, from 30-second news video clips or anything else. And I think it's really important to do these long form interviews, which is why I offer it to anyone who's running for office, whether they want to do it or not, completely up to them. But I think it's really important for people to get to understand who you are, and hopefully people around the state who don't get to meet you in person will see this, before the elections on the 29th.
Yeah, and anybody can reach out to me. I'm happy to connect with anybody. And if I haven't answered your questions, I'm more than happy to get on a call or meet you for coffee or whatever, although the days are kind of winding down now. But I'd love to talk to any of you guys. And Adam, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for all you've done for the party. I
You're welcome.
remember being really excited when you came to that very first Capitol Club and you're like, how do I,
Are you
who
sure
are
you were excited, or you didn't think I was some kind of operative plant?
No, I did not think you were an operative plant.
I work
You've
for
never
no
come
one.
across as a plant to me other than your mustache. No, I'm just kidding. I love
It's
your
true.
mustache.
Just to
But
clear
no,
the air, I work for no one. I work for the Constitution. Get over it, people.
exactly. And that's why we get along so well. Like we both just do whatever needs to be done. So I appreciate you very much for that. So thank you, Adam.
I appreciate that. Oh, and one last thing. Where can people reach out to you? Where can they find you on social media right now if they want to get to know you better and see
Yes.
all the things you got going on?
So go to darcy4chair.com, DARCYFOR chair.com. Twitter is Darcy, the number 4CO. But my name is unique enough that if any search bar of social media, you just start typing Darcy S, I'll come right up. My phone number's everywhere. So don't ever hesitate to contact me. I want to hear from you guys.
Awesome. Well, hang on for a minute as we close out here, but make sure you guys, if you haven't bought your gala tickets to the Steve Bannon event, make sure you get there so we can fight Antifa and save the Republican Party. This has been the Tuxes and Tomahawks podcast, and we'll see you guys hopefully like maybe next week after I have to start publishing like 20 shows a week now. Later.
Yeah.
Cool. You still